Well, doggone it. Oh, there it is. I'm going to get something to drink.
Hi, Lance. Is anywhere you can find a spare seat?
Okay, you want me on the perimeter? Blue?
Yeah, this perimeter. Find a seat. That's perfect.
Make a bunch of stuff about it. Go a whole bunch.
Otherwise known as Mel.
And Joe probably wouldn't care so much. Last president wouldn't like
It's the feeling part that's the problem.
Skin cancer, that's not
Yeah. Devin, how are you?
I'm well. How about you tonight?
Good.
That's trouble.
Right.
How are you?
Okay.
Trina sent me the save the date information for Ruth's birthday party.
Well, I'm not even going to make that because we got a board function all that Saturday.
You can see the whites of your eyes.
Hey, really?
Yes.
That's right.
Really? Yeah.
Is that one of the meetings with the CBT folks?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
But then they just told me, you're much better at that than I am. You know what I mean? You know, so, anyway, but I know that Joe is involved, so, yeah, because you're coming. Yeah, you know what I mean? Schizo. Yeah. Okay.
And then Craig's, well, I just spoke to him and they said they never use it. I was like, they've served on at least 2 committees here, you know, we could fill
Yeah, I would be surprised if he keeps with that, but maybe you don't.
If you ever have
You know, Dean's kind of good.
Well, I try to read every
That's
night.
the committee did the game. He's really good involved.
I sometimes think
Here's what I wanted to know. How long do you think?
Craig just comes up with an idea in his head and he wants everybody to buy it, so he sells it however he thinks it's really going to be sold at that point in time.
Well, there's no question about who the top 3 is. That's
Yeah. Well, and we were iffy. That's the thing. It's obvious we were iffy.
What I want to try to do
This up here keeps slipping into my salad dressing.
You need to be a little more open-minded.
She wouldn't let you, huh?
Would be my guess.
Good idea. I mean, that is something
This really is not a time to dive in because I would like to.
Back that way.
Yeah,
back that way. Very good.
Right, skip it down.
Okay.
I want to try to pull together all of that detail stuff, see if there's overlap, make sure, and I'm going to make some of that ready.
Well, Bill, I had a conversation meeting with Sue Ann on Monday, and I think I have a better understanding of what you were trying to tell me in the dinner meeting the other day about the issue and Janelle and Gourmet and what she was complaining about.
I'd like them to shoot the stuff. I don't know what's happening per se.
Well, I think they've moved forward despite her continued attempts to point out that she thinks they're administrating a logo incorrectly or something.
Yeah, that's a good group. Okay.
Because the guys who felt bad just told me, she said, well, first thing I checked that email.
Bad joke was
The email, I
don't want her to feel that, but I thought, you know, when you were in New York, she might have, but it sounds like.
She's the professional, I know. She didn't want to intimidate other people. To that I roll my eyes.
Had some
So,
good, maybe.
We could double your age.
And in fact, to that I would roll my eyes like a teenager to that. You know, exactly to that response.
That's right.
Jeff.
You know, there's a couple spots over here by Joe. I'm sitting here.
Brenda, I can move if you want to sit by Greg.
No,
Oh, okay.
no, I don't want her to sit back.
Oh, okay.
Nothing
Well,
against
then,
her.
Then I'll stay here.
Let her go. No, you got to get here. Get the good spots, right? These things work.
It's on.
Is it?
They're streaming it on.
Oh, that's right. Oh, good. Well, then Ustream will really like the fact that I'm tapping the microphone.
Okay, everybody, as you're eating a little bit, let me say a few words to get going. Joe is going to be first up in our meeting today. So, Joe, go ahead and finish your sandwich. Don't feel too rushed.
Thank you.
I'm going to actually have mine. The agenda today are really two items. We're going to go through the budget. And I guess what I will say, as we have done in the last couple of years, the purpose of tonight is to listen and get familiar with how the budget has been presented. You can ask some questions, and I will make them fairly free-form. You don't have to wait. If you do have a question, raise your hand. I'll acknowledge you, and we can get that question answered. Diving into details, what I would like you to do, if you have some questions in some very specific areas, and I might even at the meeting say, please put that down in writing. What I would like to do is get those gathered in one spot, and that one spot is me. So you can either write it down and hand it to me. I will make sure that you have my email address, and you can send those to me. I want to try to get them all collected in one spot, so if there is duplications, etc., and then I am going to forward those to Joe and Carol, and we'll see how voluminous they are or whatever, and try to get a timely answer back of which Common Sense says at our business meeting. So we do have some time to address things. Is that good with everybody?
The business meeting 2 weeks from now.
I think no answer is a yes. So here in a couple minutes, Joe will get you up and get you going. Then the second topic of discussion tonight is to get a report on right. Is to get a report, or are we going to do that first? Jody, are you prepared to do that?
I can
We
do it whenever you're
first,
ready.
too. Okay. Is to get a report on the College Council update. So give me a couple minutes to take a couple bites of my sandwich, and then I will formally convene the meeting and we'll move forward. Okay?
But you can start your sandwich down and discuss that too.
Well, probably I'll just take a couple bites, then I'll go get a presentation, I'll come back and eat like a normal person.
Use questions here you want written to give you. If you have very detailed questions, I'm going to stop and say, right. So, I'm not prepared to get into numbers of personnel and stuff like that. And that's fine. You can, but I'm just, that's how I'm going to operate.
Not even windy.
Yeah, you live in Nirvana.
When I don't want to be here all night. That's fine.
I'd help get this goes to 2025
Either that or I need to take you
Then I guess I'm still wanting an answer. What do you want to do with this quote-unquote audit? Last year, see, I don't know. Sometimes they restrict their views, so all we'll really know is whether or not there are mechanisms that can be done for I'm going to claim that that's the way that I'm done. And I think that's important. That will be the question I want to get at. So, that's why we need some time.
Correct. I agree.
I heard not anything too much.
They're auctioning the whole town.
It's like one
No,
person.
Yeah.
Usually if you hit people
Yeah.
Big internet thing going on the internet, own your own town.
Well, kind of how auctions work.
Is the auction going to include the gas station, or is that?
Yeah, it's making.
Very full.
Typically, I have financial audit, which is all they're doing two basic
Yeah.
things. They are making sure that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And secondly, one of the things I which is basically Fed funds, that there is some procedural type stuff.
Eric wrote his master's thesis on, for his second master's degree, on the general that town is named after. So Buford, who was a key player in Gettysburg's campaign for the North,
Like that, we'll have to
that's kind of an
get a different
unknown.
the mechanism is
Several of the tactical things that he did, they have just gone back and analyzed and said several tactical things that he did were key to the North Virginia campaign.
That's fine. I'm okay with that.
And now you're. Brenda, how are you?
I'm good. Good. Very.
Did you enjoy the Big Apple?
Yes. Yes. I did love our meetings all that much. The best part of the meetings was I got to sit by Joe and talk with him for 3 days, so that was fun.
Good.
Oh.
But other than that, I thought they were
deep with
waste
you.
of time. But we
saw
had
that.
fun. Ate some good food. Saw some good shows.
Yeah, it's long.
We saw.
Well, on my screen, I'm not a good reader.
Warhorse.
This has been fun.
I saw Red for a second time, but I've read it yet next year at the time so I'm going to see it again.
Bean.
Joe and John and I saw
Meeting either.
Rock of Ages. We also saw Nice Work If You Can Get It. That's the new one with Dr. Robert. And what did we see? Oh, there was another one that was in previews.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the Laramie County Community College Board of Trustees study session, April 4th, 2012. One thing I did, and I did want to mention as we were getting going, and Roz reminded me of this, and I saw this in the newspaper this week, that the gentleman who was the original architect for this school, whose name was Morris Kemper, did pass away this week. So she wanted me, and I'm very happy to at least make note of Morris's contributions to the college and so on. So I'll do that. First item that we'll get through right away is College Council update on shared governance, and Jody Wepner's got a report on that. Okay, Jody?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Can everybody hear me okay? This room? Okay. We discussed this a little bit, or we've been discussing it for a couple of months in board meetings at this point in time. At your last business meeting, as just a quick reminder, I had told you that the survey that was open to campus was not closing until that same week of the board meeting, and we weren't going to have any results until shortly before this meeting. So as promised, I'm back to give you what will be a brief beginning update of what we saw. I think all of you have been sent and have in front of you at this point in time copies of the survey results. These are the survey that was sent out to full-time employees on campus. The student survey closed last Friday, and we don't have results from the student survey at this point in time. But in addition to the online survey for students, student government has been doing or is working to do some paper surveys and a couple of things. So we should have more information about the same type of information from the student standpoint as we move forward. One thing we were very, very pleased with when we got our first look at the results was how many employees we had respond to this survey. Historically, as you know, surveys sometimes don't get this type of response, don't get a great response on this campus, and we had 224 employees on campus that responded to the survey, which is a pretty good, which is actually a very, very good response rate for this survey. A couple of things I'd like to point out right away. These are initial survey results. We had our first discussion about the survey results last Friday. We went into it with the standpoint of looking at it as a beginning discussion only. We are not making any recommendations at this time. We are in the process as a council to remind the campus, sending information about the initial results, including our minutes from the Friday meeting, which should be going out. Some of them went out today, some of them will go out tomorrow to the different employee groups on campus to solicit additional feedback before we make any beginning recommendations, which we're hoping to make some preliminary recommendations at our next meeting, which is the 13th. On the 13th, council's meeting in the morning. I will then be meeting with Jeff Schmidl and the rest of the faculty senate on the afternoon so that we can discuss some of those preliminary recommendations with faculty senate as well. Couple key points. The vast majority of employees indicated through the survey that they would support a shared governance model, which is an important, I think was probably the most important piece for moving forward at all. I think it was really just under 90% of all. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brenda. You have a question?
Jody, why would somebody respond no?
We saw some of that information, and I mean, I can't tell you exactly why because I wasn't one of the employees that responded no on the survey, but
okay.
There were some indication, if you read the comments, that some people said they responded no because they didn't really understand the definition of shared governance and exactly what it was going to do.
Oh.
And so I think some of them, from that standpoint, were responding no from that standpoint. But once again, we were just under 90% of all employees who took the survey supported some aspect of shared governance, understanding that what it's actually going to look like when it's done, maybe something that we're going to have to take a look at as we move forward. One of the things that came up very clear from the data, and it's I don't know the exact numbers on. I think it might have been number 3 in the survey, and a couple of other questions were how to determine how representation was going to be chosen, and the campus seemed to be actually fairly well split between direct representation, meaning you're voted directly from your constituency group, and what we refer to as mediated representation or designated or delegated representation. The idea being that other employee groups on campus could potentially delegate the people or the representatives that would serve on college council. Obviously, because that result was almost, when you add the two of them up, they're almost split right down the middle. We would need to look. The initial discussion that took place on that was, potentially looking at combining them. Letting the employee groups that exist, designate some of the members that are going to serve, while letting another member be elected from the groups at large. But like I said, these are initial discussions. We're not at a point where we're going to make any recommendations at this point. There was some concern. I think the initial proposal for college council, or the redesign of college council, noted that because of the decision-making or the potential decision-making aspect of college council, that the people that were in the position to have a final say on those decisions needed to be sitting at the table. There was some concern about that, and that is spelled out fairly clearly it's actually spelled out fairly clearly in the results as well. And the other one that was rather interesting was that the majority of the data, when asked the question about what type of body it should be, whether it should be a decision-making body or a recommending and advising body, and this is in item 11 on the survey, question number 11, that there's a fairly, and I wouldn't say completely clear, but there's a strong indication that the majority of employees on campus believe that this group should be in a place where they can sit and they can discuss items, but they really should not be making final decisions, that they should be making recommendations and pass those on to the final decision makers, with the understanding that it would probably be a fairly strong decision coming from that standpoint. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm going to qualify that by letting you all know that I'm not a statistician, so I'm hoping you're not going to ask me the technical questions. But Carol.
It's probably in here somewhere, but how big do you see this group being? I know if it's 2 representatives, then it's smaller than if you elect 3, or about what would the ratio be?
I think that's still in discussion. Obviously, if it's 2 members of each, potentially of each constituency body, as it stands right now, College Council is 11 people with the president serving as an ex officio member, because it's two representatives from each of the 5 classified constituency groups. There's been some discussion that, there was some indication and some discussion that they may want, potentially more representation from each of the groups. We had a discussion about 3 representatives. The idea being that if you had 3, it might be easier to classify between direct representation and mediated or delegated representation on the council scenario. But once again, that's in our early discussions right now. That's something that we were putting that information out and eliciting some additional feedback from campus.
Chairman.
Sorry.
Jody, there's a question in here about whether board members should be on this.
Yes.
Did that just come out of the blue, or did somebody actually suggest that board members be a part of this?
It was part of the initial. Presentation that the president made, initially looking at who might have a seat at the table for this new group. And one of the questions was, should we include other people such as board members or something to that effect? And if so, should they be in a voting capacity or an ex officio capacity? And I think you're talking about, okay.
Yeah.
Question number
4.
5.
5, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And once again, we were, if you add together on college council in an ex officio capacity and on college council as a voting member, you're getting pretty close to the number of people who said that they shouldn't be on college council at all. So it's split right down the, once again, it kind of split in the middle. Something obviously I think would garner further discussion. And I think, at some point in time, it might be very helpful for college council to get an idea from the board members about what they would feel about serving on the college council. So, great.
Would you like that right now?
Yeah.
Is this you speaking in your capacity? Or?
No,
Okay.
I'm going to go around.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to say yes. Ex officio.
Yes, you
Ex
would
officio.
like a seat at the table. Okay.
I vote no. I think
Okay.
the board has plenty to do already, and I don't see why we need more seats on more things at the college.
Okay. Who's next? Ed?
Ed.
I'll let Carol go first.
It's a simple question, yes or no.
I'd really like to do it, but I'm going to vote no.
Okay. Ed? I'm going to put you on the
No.
spot. Okay? Bill?
I think, no.
Okay? Brenda?
Greg, I say no. We
Okay.
have a lot of decision-making authority already on this campus through our elected positions. This is about the college. I say no.
Okay.
Although
Of
it's
course you
important to
have said
understand that the
Yeah.
suggestion of what potentially is going to get, the types of things that may come through this new redesigned college council could eventually get to a point where college council would make a strong recommendation and the board's going to have to make the final decision on it anyway.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think you got a 5-to-1 vote right now,
Okay.
and so I would lean towards no. And I guess mine was an ex officio, just so if you thought you wanted to know what was going on, but you're right, we do have a lot of stuff. So I'm going to claim, we as a board say right now we shouldn't be on it.
Okay. Any
And
other
for the
questions?
minutes, Mr. Chair, you may want to indicate that was a straw poll.
Straw poll.
Not that you can vote here tonight.
Oh, yes. That's true, straw poll.
Vicki, you heard me say straw before. didn't you? I just have one question, and it's probably going to go to Joe and to Jody. We have a lot to do at this college. We are going to rely upon some group to help us with that. When is your prognosis of when this group will be officially formed and operating?
Would you like Joe's answer or the college council answer?
I'd like to hear college council's answer,
Yeah.
actually.
We actually discussed that at our meeting on
Okay.
Friday, and it's the fervent goal of the college council to have the makeup for this new group in place by the time we leave it for this semester, so in a month.
Okay, in a month.
Which is when this semester is done.
Okay, make sure that's in the record. No. Okay, no, I'm just
So,
curious, because like I say, we have some heavy lifting to do, and I don't think we want to do it by ourselves.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, I concur, and I've been hopefully not too silent as the process has been going, because these folks have been doing great work in getting to their constituencies and having the conversation. I would like this group also in place here as soon as possible. I think I've said that before. Spring is when we like it. We've got a lot of work ahead of us starting the summer and next year certainly, and it looks like it's coming together quite nicely. So I've been very appreciative of the work they're doing, and they're doing the heavy lifting on this.
Great, and I'm very appreciative too. That's for me personally. Okay. Any other, yes, sir?
Jody, the one thing I'd be concerned about, and I don't think we need to be there ex officio, but the minutes that would come would be really critical that we understand the discussion in some way that has taken place, so that we can appreciate what has been put into the decision or recommendation of that governance group. That would be the only value, and I'm not going to backstep in terms of saying we should be on there, but that's the one concern I have, is that we would get that communication.
exactly, and those are the exact discussions we had when the discussion about whether or not a board of trustee member should sit, either as a voting or an ex officio member on the council at that point in time. It was for that exact reason, so that the folks are there, you have an idea of what the discussion is. As Dr. Schaefer put out when he proposed this and sent the idea to campus the first time, the key focus on this is going to be communication and making sure that the members of this group are very clearly communicating with their constituencies. So, which will also include the board of trustees.
Yes, Butch, go ahead.
Jody, will this include the Albany County campus representation on this council?
The makeup of the college council right now doesn't have a specific spot for the Albany County campus, but obviously members of the groups, and we haven't specifically discussed whether or not we would put, a separate representation for the Albany County campus, but that's certainly something for discussion, and I'm glad to hear that, because that's something we can bring up when we discuss it again on the 13th. So.
And Butch, nice to see you here, by the way. Thanks for coming over. Just to put some context, I don't know how familiar you are with some of the proposed changes and reorganizations, but one of the proposed changes as part of the implementing our organizational assessments recommendations is moving Dean Stalnecker to an associate vice president, have him reporting as part of president's cabinet. The current makeup proposes that that person has a seat, a voting seat on the college council, or a recommending seat, depending on where it ends up. So by virtue of his position and the shift of that in the organizational structure, there will be voice for the Albany County campus on the council.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If none, I will open it up to any public opinion or public input. If anybody would like to say anything. If none, thank you, Jody.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
I will stay tuned. We will have more at the next business meeting.
Okay, next item on the agenda is beginning of our discussion of the fiscal year 2013 budget. Dr. Schaefer is going to start us off. So, all yours, Dr. Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just a brief overview of sort of how we want to walk through the presentation tonight. Vice President Hoagland and I will be tag teaming this. I will have the first set of just a handful of slides that are really intended to provide context and overview and sort of the high-level summary of what we are proposing within the FY13 budget. Carol will get into a little bit more of the detail pertaining to the different funds and some of the changes within the funds, and we'll take your lead on how you want to engage in question and answer as we move through this. I might recommend that you let Carol and I walk through the slides, walk through the presentation that we have here, and then open up the conversation there so that you have the complete context. This presentation, as in past years, will actually flow with your budget books, and in most of the slides I think we've actually added page numbers so you can reference as we go through, summarized on screen, more detail in your books as we go through. If I may, I'll start by providing a little bit of the context or the environment that we were in as we started developing this budget, and know that the budget was started and on its way prior to my arrival, but I do feel like we jumped in sort of right at a good time, an opportune time in stream, and it's moved along quite nicely. I'm very appreciative of everybody who's participated in the budget process. I can't say enough about Jane and the rest of the folks in Carol's office in terms of putting the detail together for this study session for the initial proposal. But let me just talk briefly about the state context, and most of this isn't a surprise to anybody, but this is sort of the big picture that we stepped into the development of this budget under. I think you're all aware that as we went into the conversations with the Joint Appropriations Committee, as the governor proposed his initial budget, looking at the state, there was this understanding or belief that we needed to hold the state standard budget, to hold it down, hold it to a minimum, really try to control some of the rapid growth that had happened over the previous years. That tenor came out of the governor's proposed budget and certainly went into the Joint Appropriations Committee. There was also and is also still a strong belief because of the revenue projections, because of the growth in the state standard budget, that there would be limited or none changes depending on who you're talking to specifically, compensation adjustments, pay raises as we went in. And many of you who are attuned to what's happening with the other state agencies know that this is a reality, looking at pay freezes for the coming year and if not the coming biennium. Shortly after the governor's proposed budget, we received updated revenue estimates. You've been reading the paper, natural gas prices decreasing to a historic low, production still at an all-time high, warm weather, all that good stuff has really impacted the anticipated revenue. And I want to say the estimate was that we would have $100 million less than what the governor believed when he put together his first budget. Those estimates continue to look less than desirable into the future, and so it was another thing we had to be aware of, that the revenue stream, the primary revenue stream for the state may be challenged. Enrollment growth funding, I believe you would know and understand the enrollment growth funding mechanism that was implemented a few biennia ago. It was an attempt by the legislature to create an additional revenue stream that could be grown or reduced with the variability in student enrollment. The enrollment growth is not enrollment growth of this year, but it's really based on enrollment growth since the 2004-2005 years. And I think since that time, especially with turnover in legislative delegates and other folks, haven't understood that really is funding for the students we are currently serving, because we're looking at a base year of 2004-2005. So I think there was some considerable, question or at least uncertainty in understanding what enrollment growth funding was. The governor's original budget proposed full funding at about $14.4 million. When the revenue estimates came out, he came back to the Joint Appropriations Committee and actually recommended reducing that approximately in half to $8.8 million. The Joint Appropriations Committee then eliminated it completely in the budget they advanced to the legislature. And by the end of the legislature, they had restored $7.5 million of enrollment growth funding going forward. We will see a significant chunk of that over the course of the biennium and may actually help us. But given all sources, state aid, the increased in tuition that the commission approved, some local funds and the other sources, we estimate that LCCC will have about $2 million in new revenue for FY13. For some institutional context, and this is really the context in which you as the board and many others have provided the leadership of the campus and myself as we've come on. I've really tried to distill it, and I'll admit to trying to further articulate, perhaps massage what I believe your priorities to be into what I understand as the priorities for the campus in light of your position. And they really were just in a handful of areas. One of the first ones I heard was that we need to analyze, we need to look at adapting where appropriate and implementing the recommendations from the organizational assessment done by the College Brain Trust. We've had many conversations about that already. Some of the actions that we're working on and have already done are a result of those recommendations, and they do have fiscal impacts. I've heard, and we've heard, that you believe we need to make, and we agree, a purposeful investment in faculty and instruction. And we took that to heart when we developed this budget and looked specifically at those areas where we know we have a backlog of students, we have courses filled, we have opportunities to rectify needs, instructional needs, and serve students and continue to serve students at a high quality. Many of the recommendations in the organizational assessment and what we knew even prior to that is that we needed a strengthened centralized human resource structure on this campus. We needed to bring consistency and coherence to the way we manage our largest resource, which is our human resources. This budget looks at that. We heard that you wanted to set aside money for planning, for facilities planning, institutional planning. We also heard very clearly at the last board meeting that you want to see movement for base commitments off of the 1 mil funds to the general fund. And get away from that. And then lastly, heard a need for flexibility for the future, whether that's for opportunities or some of the challenges that we may see as we come into the future. Now quickly, just a few other things to provide some context about where we're at and what we consider when we develop a budget. No surprise, you've seen this graph over and over again. It charts the very rapid and dramatic growth that LCCC has had in enrollment. A few dips associated in there along the way, but you can tell that we continue to be on that trajectory for increased enrollment. This graph illustrates what you could call either an efficiency measure or a deficiency measure. It depends on what you want to look at. But this illustrates our spending per student FTE. So this is the amount on average that we spend, the blue, per student FTE. The red is the average of the Wyoming Community colleges. Simply put, we spend considerably less than the other, on average, than the other community colleges in Wyoming. And like I said, that can be a good thing, saying we're efficient with our resources, we provide a high quality education, and we do it at a lower cost than the other campuses. But you could also look at it when you get too far where you're not providing enough funding to manage the resources and to provide the educational opportunity that you want to provide. When we look at it broken down by program area, if you will, there's 3 areas where we spend more than the average of Wyoming community colleges. That's in academic support, in scholarships, and then slightly in public service. In all other categories, instruction, student services, institutional support, and plan operations, we actually spend less per student FTE than the average of the other Wyoming community colleges. This graph illustrates trends in investment, or how we've allocated our budget in each of these areas over the past few years. And I just want to draw your attention to the column on the very right, which is the 1-year % change within this proposed budget. And you can see our largest investment, our second largest investment is in instruction, a slight increase in public service. In reality, this is a decrease from past years, but a slight increase for the 1-year change. Academic support has an increase. A part of that increase is the beginning to shift some of the base commitments off of the 1 mil over to the general fund. Student services actually has a decrease, and I'll talk about that in a second. Institutional support goes up, again, most significant, because that includes human resources investments, president's investments, things that we're doing with the foundation, and I'll talk about that in a second. That's why that investment goes up. Plant maintenance essentially flat, and scholarships essentially flat. I won't ask you to read all this. I just want to point out a few things here. This is simply a comparison of how each of the 7 Wyoming community colleges distributes their budget to those different areas. And a few things I want to point out. In terms of instruction, we, outside of Casper, we invest the most in instruction with, I believe, Northwest right behind us. But really, we're all in the 40% of our budget going to instruction. percentages, varying slightly, but LCCC comes behind Casper and then shortly followed by Northwest. The other areas where we are above everyone except for one, Eastern, is in scholarship. And I know scholarship has been a big conversation on campus about how much we invest and what we do and is it appropriate. I'll be honest, I'm less concerned about the level of investment in scholarship because I think Wyoming Community Colleges do a very good job of investing in scholarships. I'm more concerned with how efficient and how effective we are in the allocation of those scholarship dollars. And certainly that'll lead to questions and conversations over the coming years. But in general, what we find is the community colleges are fairly similar in the way we distribute. There's a few shifts here and there between how people invest in student services versus academic support versus plan versus those types of areas. But it's a good way for us to see, are we out of whack with everybody else in Wyoming? Or are we in general in line with where they're at? This graph is just a revenue statement. It's almost identical to the expenditures per student FTE. It shows how much money we have per student FTE. And again, because we have a higher enrollment than most of the other community colleges, we actually have less revenue per student FTE than the average of the other community colleges. In terms of distribution, and this is interesting, and I don't know that I'm even 100% sure exactly why it is the way it is, but when we look at the distribution of our revenues from sources per student FTE, we have a higher level of tuition and fees per student FTE than the average of the Wyoming community colleges. Could be an enrollment function. It's part of function of the funding model because of the way we have a high variable percentage because we have so many students. We have a lot invested in instruction. So there's a few things going on here. It could be our tuition and fee structure. We're going to take a look and see what's going on there. But more specifically is that both state appropriation and local appropriations and even other sources, which I'm less concerned about, we actually have less in terms of revenue for those two sources than the average of the other community colleges. Context. So let me get to the specifics about what is in the proposed FY13 budget and what we're bringing forward to you. It reallocates nearly $1 million of existing funds into instruction, human resources, and targeted areas. It's actually about $938,000. So if you round it would probably be closer to $900,000 than $1 million. But $1 million sounds big. It invests in instruction. We actually are adding 5 new faculty positions and moving 3 positions off of soft funds onto the general fund to create the stability that we need there. It does establish a very strong centralized human resource structure, both in terms of requests for consultation services as well as investment in personnel to really help us do what we need to do on this campus. It proposes increasing operating reserves to approximately 1%. And that's a significant increase from last year. Still not where Vice President Hoagland would like us to be, but it is an increase. And knowing that we have some challenges in the future, potential challenges with revenue and conversations that are happening at the state level in regards to reductions, it's a good investment to set that aside at this time. And then it also proposes $175,000 in facilities planning reserve to do some of the facilities planning. We do have money in the current year. We anticipate having some carryover funds for it. So I think we have funds within this budget for facilities planning. It also proposes an increase in investment with the foundation of almost 100%. And I'll show you that in a second. That is, of course, pending on our conversations with the foundation, how we enter into our agreement with them. But I believe it's the right move to get us in line with where the other community colleges invest in their foundations, as well as the right move as we look forward to potential capital campaign activities or other campaign activities. It does propose to get to some of the CBT's recommendations about integrating and elevating planning, technology, institutional assessment of institutional effectiveness. As you saw in my proposed reorganization, the addition of an associate vice president of institutional effectiveness. This budget actually proposes bringing that on mid-year, so half of the funding for that. We do propose to address a lot of the deferred maintenance and facilities grounds improvements that we considered as part of the facilities plans at your last board meeting that are in your campus master plan, and I'm very pleased to see that in there. And it proposes to improve opportunities for students by investing in a full-time athletic director position. And I'm believing you will have questions about that, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to answer those questions. Here's what's not in the budget: pay raises. You'll see we have a small amount in there for educational advancements, but we strongly believe that as much as we would like to reward and recognize the work that our faculty and staff do at LCCC, we really need to step in line with the remainder of the state of Wyoming and tighten our belts and hold true to the wishes of the legislature and intent. And the other one is an additional investment in student services. I've told Vice President Wilson this over and over and over again. There is no bigger champion on this campus and nobody who wants to invest in student services more than me. This year is about looking at student services, looking at these large functions that we're defining and designing new models for, advising, first year experience, counseling, career advisement, and all the reorganization. This year is going to be about building the model, defining the model. Next year and the following year will be about investing to make those models take off. So it's something I do want to draw your attention to because our lack of investment this year is not a reflection at all of where I think we need to be investing. We're just not ready to do it yet. Page 14 and page 15 are straightforward. What this just illustrates is, as I said, we estimate we'll have about $2 million in new funds available with reallocations. We're at about $938,000. So in total funds available for us to invest, total new fund, a base commitment, would be about $3 million. How we've proposed investing that, $45,000 into educational advancements, $586,000 into instruction, $310,000 into workforce and community development, predominantly in the instructional areas for faculty. Student services shows a plus here because of the proposed full-time athletic director position. Administration and finance at $128,000. Much of that taken up by our increases in insurance, if I understand correctly. The president's a big one, and so to cover my rear end, I wanted to give you a little more detail, specifically on what we're doing here: the human resources investment, the foundation, contracted services, and half of the year of the associate vice president. And then our operating reserve account, increasing that to 1% or $426,000, facilities planning, and one-time expenditures that are on the following page. So with that, I'm happy to pause, Mr. Chairman, for questions. I know Carol can work us through the rest of the detail through your budget book, and then we can have a conversation. I am at your leisure, one way or the other.
What I'd like to do, Joe, is take questions for you. Then we'll take a short break so people can throw away their plates, etc. And then, Carol, you can come back and kind of go through the details of that. So, do I have questions for Dr. Schaefer? Kevin.
This is a sticking point with me. It looks like after this reorganization, once again, that we'll end up with more administrators than we started with. And we were already sort of high on administrators as a percentage of employees compared to our comparator institutions. So please explain to me that we aren't going to end up with more administrators and more cost in administration, etc.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Kilty, the actual numbers of where we will end up with the number of administrative positions or administrators, and I find that we use those terms in different ways in different contexts, so it may even help me to understand how the board wants to define those. But my proposal and my continuing position is that the number of administrators will actually be flat once we're done with all of these things. And having looked at the comparisons with our peer groups, having looked at all of the Wyoming community colleges, I would hold that we are right in the ballpark where we should be for administrative positions, and not necessarily in excess. I think I've said that before in the past, that where I believe we actually outpace our peers and other community colleges in the state is actually in our ESSC staff and professional staff, not in administrative positions. Through this reorganization, my hope is that we will better align how we're allocating our administrative resources so that we can function in the way we want to as a campus and serve our faculty, staff, and students in the way that we want to on campus. But the numbers of deans, the numbers of executives, the numbers of presidents, cabinet members, if you will be in flux over the coming year as part of the reorganization. And even just as part of this proposed budget, we're already moving some of the dollars around within those positions.
Joe,
Go ahead, Brenda.
Sorry, I have a couple questions. Just so I make sure I understand correctly, the 5 new positions are the ones that are in English, Spanish, biology and communication, and diesel tech. And then the 3 you said are being transferred from other funding sources are the diagnostic sonography, the ET or CTEC apprenticeship, and wind energy. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Chairman, Trustee Little, yes.
Okay, and can you tell me how you came about making the decision on the instructors? I don't disagree with them. I just would like to hear how you made the decision.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Trustee Little, the instructional areas went through a process where each of the deans within their areas collected. I might ask Marlene to help me here if I get too far off track, so just shake your head if I do. Collected and looked at enrollment information, looked at distribution of courses and students taught by full-time versus part-time faculty, looked at backlog of students in terms of waiting lists and things like that, advanced recommendations with those data up through the dean, and the deans collectively debated and looked at what they would advance. I came in midstream and I recognized that, and I'm grateful that they were patient and said, we want to look at those positions that we know if we hire them, we add the sections, they'll fill, where we have backlog, where we have need, and that's why those positions are advanced the way they are in terms of the new positions. The other positions moving off of soft money are a result of the soft money changing and things like that, but very similar analysis.
Oh, that makes sense. And Greg, can I ask you one more thing?
Sure.
Full-time athletic director, is this different than Jason Ficca's position?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Little, and I know Coach Fick is here in the room, so he's far enough away, he won't throw anything at me. I get off base, but yes, right now we have the structure where our athletic director is part-time athletic director and part-time men's basketball coach. And one of the things that I've heard over and over again as I stepped on was really a need and a request from the students to start looking at access to recreational facilities, looking at expanded hours, expanded opportunities. We've been collecting an intramural sports fee from them and have not developed intramural sports. And those are all things that we believe can function under a full-time athletic director. We can make significant improvement on serving students. And that's why I know people see athletic director and they don't see, why would this be a priority? We really do want to provide those opportunities for our students and then ultimately for our community. And it's just not reasonable to ask somebody who for 8 months of the year is recruiting, coaching, and on the road and doing those types of things. So we believe this will actually go a long ways to solving some of those issues, let alone looking at new ways to open doors with the community to get them engaged through athletics and campus recreation and some of the opportunities we'd like to explore. This actually is I believe, a very good investment.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Thank you. No more questions, Greg.
Mr. Chair.
Ed, go ahead.
I'd like to take a look at those 3 positions that are coming off soft money and going on general fund money. Are those positions and the tasks that are incorporated in those, whatever the position might be, whether it's wind energy or the CTEC, when that happens, there, to me, ought to be an approval process. Programs get an approval, and if you're going to move positions which imply continuation of programs to soft money, I would like to see us as the board have a role in approving those, and maybe that's the process that you're asking us to look at this point. But I don't think those positions should be seen as just transferable, that we're shifting from soft money, because the institution now has a commitment long-term there. That's a change in contracts for those people, and I think it's important that we take a look at that issue rather than simply put it into the budget. That's my concern on those 3 soft positions. Additionally, when I look at the whole budget as we talk about here, and we've got about $2 million that we're looking at additionally, and then another 900 or so million there. When you look at a $40 million budget, that's about 5% of that is new money, which means $40 million we didn't look at. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't considered, because you did do a reallocation of 2% of that money, about $980 million or so, but it seems like Groundhog Day. You know, we did what we did before, and we're going to do that again. And it's not really an issue of justification as to whether we want to continue some of those programs, some of those positions. I don't know. That concerns me, because we're not really assessing how effective we are in those areas, which comes back to an earlier point that was clearly set out, the assessment, the analysis, implementation. And I know that's going to come. I know that's near and dear to you. So I look forward to seeing that more thorough as we do the budget process next time. But I think we need to definitely have a red flag up on that issue. In addition,
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I stop you there? Because
Okay.
you're running some thoughts together, and I want to stop and
Okay.
make sure I'm clear on a couple of things before we move ahead, if you don't mind. Somebody explain to me this soft money situation.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Soft money is monies that are either grant funded, state funded, have no necessary assurance that they will be there in long term. In fact, in 2 of the cases, I believe that the grant is actually going to be gone, and so they will do that. So it is moving them off of soft money to the general fund, and does recognize a ongoing commitment then to those faculty positions. And I'll pause there.
Okay. And Ed, I guess what I'm hearing from you, are we making the conclusion because they move off of soft money to hard money or to commitment, are those students still there? Is that program still there? I
Mr.
don't know. Yeah.
Chairman, my concern there is just that, whether or not we as a board are taking a look at those programs, whether or not that need is a continuation or not, at least being informed. I think we're charged with recognizing programs and improving programs,
Right.
and so that's a concern to me, that we don't just automatically go from soft to hard money, so to speak.
And that's where I'm kind of confused. We do, and I think that we wanted a say in new programs around here. And to me, I don't distinguish between hard or soft. It's a program or not a program. And I guess that's the question that I ask. And these are what, specifically in the wind energy?
They're in the, Mr. Chairman, they're in the workforce development area. For the most part, one is in the healthcare, health sciences area, 2 are in IST and wind energy, or HVAC and wind energy, I believe, to do that. But your questions and your point, Trustee Mosier, are all perfect. And I think many of, I won't speak for the board, but my interpretation of the board, many of the questions and concerns you have relate to processes, how we approve a program. And when a program is approved on soft money as a grant, does that mean we commit to that long term? Do we consider that? Is there other contingencies that are included within that approval that suggest, yes, when the grant money goes, we have to kick these back to the hopper? Those processes will come. I can assure you we will work on them. I cannot necessarily go back and tell you exactly what process, how it was there, where it was there, whether it was appropriate. I know my colleagues probably could. The way and the approach we took at this is that these programs were approved by the board. They are part of the institution's program. That money is going away. We do have students in them. They are good programs, needed programs. They have those. It made sense to move those over. Now, there's a whole level of conversation that needs to happen about a comprehensive and institutionally adopted program analysis, if you will. How the board plays in that will be determined by your new governance structure. There's a lot of those things that we will work on, and you have my commitment to that. It's just not feasible for us to do that right now. So we are essentially approached with the concept of, do we run out of money and then close these programs? And there's a whole lot of logistical issues with that outside of just the student impacts. Or do we move them to general funds, recognize the process can be improved, and move forward from here? And that's the position that we've taken, and I'm taking with this budget proposal.
A good answer for there. I got a couple other things to follow up on yours, Ed. I do not believe, and hopefully, Carol, that we're in a situation where we go, the 40 was what we had last year, and we just move forward. I hope that is not the case. I think people take a look at their operations. I know that was the case at one time, and I was vehemently opposed to that. And you can call it zero-based budgeting. I don't care what you call it. The point is I think folks here, and I'm hoping that's happening in the budget process, need to take a look at their operations and make the decisions of how those need to operate. And so that 40 million, at least in my mind, from what I know, has been taken a look at. So, and I don't want it to come across, because that's just not the way I think this college ought to operate, and so on. So that's, I guess, my wanted to make sure that we're clear on that. And you're shaking your head, yes, Carol and Joe. Is that true? I guess.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me respond quickly to that. Yes, from the operation side, the operating expenditures, without a doubt. In fact, we went back numerous times and looked at those, whittled those, and really brought those in line with where we needed to be, and those were considered across the board. Here's the reality, and part of this will eventually be driven by these processes, program, academic, and co-curricular reviews, the things that decide whether or not what we're doing is effective any longer. The reality is the vast majority of our budget is tied up in personnel. The vast majority of it in salaries and benefits. And I believe the board understands and recognizes that that has actually been one of the biggest challenges in terms of managing our resources on this campus. It's one of the reasons we're recommending an investment in human resources. So whether we had the intent, whether we wanted to do that, it is incredibly complex to move through managing and reallocating to that. So do we consider it? You bet. And we look at every opportunity. We had a vacancy come open, and you can ask Vice President Hoagland how hard we looked at those things when they come open. The reality is to go in and purposely say we're just going to shift this or shift that in any one year is not that easy yet. That'll be driven by process and cleaning up of some of the things we need to do within our policies and even in some of your board rules.
Okay, Ed, I interrupted you.
That's
Do you
okay,
wanna
I'll look a couple
continue to
others,
go on,
and then I'll come back.
We have some other hands. Kevin, go ahead.
I've got 3 questions I want to ask you. First of all, the AD position, you've justified it really by talking about intramurals and talking about resource use on campus, expanding the resource use on campus. But let me just bring up a couple of points regarding that. First of all, we had intramurals here at one time without an athletic director. What happened? The intramurals should be handled through the student life, which is sort of the way they were handled before. So that does not require an AD to get intramurals put together. We did it before. I just don't understand why we haven't for the last few years. Then regarding resource use, there was a time when I complained about the amount of hours that, say, our multi-purpose room was open, and I was told that they couldn't have it open more hours because they just didn't have the budget to hire student help to oversee the place. So we were talking about something like $80 a week is what we were missing to keep it open more. And I don't understand how an AD position is going to help us make those resources more available to people for $100,000 a year rather than $80 a week. If we were unwilling to spend $80 a week at one time, it seems like we're awfully willing to spend $100,000 on a new position. So that's all I have to say. The AD position. I wish you'd tell us more about what we're going to get out of an AD position. Next, these soft money positions. I'd just like to ask you a little bit about this. At most schools where I've been in the past, you have people on soft money, you have people on hard money. And I don't believe you'd ever just move the personnel from one to the other. They'd have to go through some sort of a hiring process, probably. So, these soft money positions that you are proposing be moved to hard money, are they already filled? And will there be anything like a hiring process that goes on there?
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Kilty, 2 things. The athletic director position and what you're getting with that and what is working. I don't know the history of when we offered them or how we offered them. Certainly we've debated and discussed multiple options in regards to that position. What I can tell you is the student growth on this campus has changed the very environment from our ability to do things because of smaller numbers in the past to what we have to work with right now. There are a multitude of issues pertaining to access to facilities, coordination of facilities, the programs themselves, looking at how we engage our communities. One of the things that I've heard the most from our students since I've got here is this is an area we want to see improved. We need to do it. We want those hours. We're making that role to do that, and it's working. In fact, in the editorial in the Wingspan, it points out the intramurals and something with the climbing wall. When we look at how we can impact students across the board and how we can start to serve and create a campus environment conducive to student engagement, student wellness, I will stand by this proposal that it is a good investment in establishing and accomplishing the things that students have said they wanted. So that's the athletic director. In regards to the soft money, I'm not familiar with how or where the programs were approved, what type of processes were in place when they did that. I'm familiar with institutions, including the one I came to. When we approved a program on soft money, we did it under one of 2 things. One, that it was assumed that when we approved it, when that soft money went away, it would become a commitment by the institution. Or 2, when the soft money went away, we would reevaluate the program and then put it back through the process.
In this case, those positions are filled. They are currently teaching students in programs, and we're proposing moving them over, and then look forward to clarifying the process that comes to those decisions. But we have commitments to personnel, and they have the same rights as all the other employees on our campus, and we need to look at how we want to manage those programs and manage those human resources. And again, this is, given the context, this is what we're proposing.
Go ahead, Kevin.
One more question. I said I had 3 here, and this is a third one. This will probably cause some consternation. But you have just talked about process here and how you think the process is really very good, and I'm going to give you some counterexample that I think the process is pretty loose in places. Now you say our money's tied up in personnel. Let me talk about something that's not personnel, and I'm not going to name the specific program, but there's a program here that has an educational supplies budget that exceeds the
Could you speak
educational.
louder, please? I can't hear you. Thank you.
There is a program on this campus that has an educational supplies budget that exceeds the educational supplies budget in physics, chemistry, biology, anatomy, physiology, geology, and astronomy combined. It's a very large educational supplies budget. If you go in and look at the details of it, there are expenditures in there that look like construction, there are expenditures for food, there are expenditures that just indicate various supplies and so forth. It does not look like the process of a careful budgeting process where we thought carefully about what we needed to do in the next year. This same program didn't encumber all of its money, got to carry monies forward into the next year, which meant they now had more money to spend on educational supplies than they budgeted, and are now asking for that same amount of money to be carried forward into this next budget that they're asking for here. When you look at what is described as justification, they say, we're not asking for any more money, so there's no justification there at all. But they are asking for more money. They're asking for 14% more money. They're asking for a carryover to be added to their baseline. So this doesn't look like, I am fully aware that there are probably plenty of people on this campus who go through their budget with a sharp pencil point and can justify every expenditure they intend to make. I just don't see any of that. I don't see any of it. And I think we really need some opportunity to talk about this and get some specific answers to some of these specific issues that suggest to me that there isn't a uniform process here at all.
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Kilty, and if I said it, let me clarify, and I hope my actions to this point have suggested that while I think this process works to get us where we are, I'm keenly aware of the areas we need to improve the process. It's one of the main purposes of College Council and the proposed shared governance model that we're working towards. It's been keen on my list in conversations and the way we've actually worked at this. So I recognize that this process could be improved considerably. So know that I don't believe this is a perfect process, and this is exactly the way we do that. Could I change that process midstream of the budget? No, I didn't anticipate that I would be able to, nor that we would be able to dig in and do that. Is there need or is there discrepancy in operational supplies and how we do that? To my knowledge, we do not carry over general fund monies allocated to a program. The operating expenses are proposed new each year as we go through. Could we do a better job of monitoring those across the campus? You bet. Could we do a better job of defining the resources needed to provide quality education in the myriad programs that we offer? You bet. The trouble I'm having at this point, and we will get to it, is understanding the concern, whether it is mismanagement of funds that the board is concerned about, whether it is inappropriate levels of funding for certain areas on campus or certain program areas. If I knew what the board's ultimate concerns were, I could really hone in and try to get to that sooner than later. And so I'll be looking for some guidance from you, but recognize, I know we have work to do.
Are you still going, Kevin?
No, and I'd just like to say, yeah, I don't know how the rest of the board views this. All I know is what I see, and we haven't had an opportunity to even talk about this as a board, and here we are approving a budget again. You know,
Kevin, I'm going to
about
stop you
about
on
this
that
has
one.
to stop.
You know what, Kevin? I'm going to stop you on that.
Okay.
We are not approving a budget today. This is the first swipe of the board at the budget. It is what, the 4th of April? Our approval of the budget is in July, third week of July. And that's why we're doing this here today, and that's why I said at the beginning of the meeting, Kevin, you've got some specific things. I will talk to you about those. There's ways of going about it, and Joe is right. To say I want to look at something, we need to be a little bit more specific as to why, okay? Do we think there's, like I said, mismanagement? Or is there something, whatever you said, Joe, there are several things that need to be taken a look at. I am not opposed to doing that at all. It does need to come through the board in the proper manner, and we will get it to the right people and get the answers that we want. Now, the other thing too, and I think this is part of our board governance, is that the board needs to want that, and I just really don't want to get in a position where anytime any trustee, including myself, wants to go look at some details of things, we need to make sure that that is something that is useful for us and so on. So that's how I kind of want to try to leave that. And I'm going to go back and say, this is the first swipe at the budget. We want to hear what is being proposed. I want you, Kevin, and I'll sit down with you to do that. If you have some specific things that we want to take a look at, that is why we're meeting here on April 4th. So we don't need to get cantankerous about it, but I kind of want, that's why I want to keep it at this level of us learning what is being proposed. If you do have detailed questions, absolutely we want to address those. Because what I want to come out of this, and it's one of our biggest responsibilities as trustees, is approving this budget, and we need to feel comfortable with it. And I will tell you, in an organization like this, we're not going to agree with every single little thing. There's some give and take, and then also that if there are things that, and Joe, I appreciate the fact that there is some process stuff that it has to take a look at, and it's going to get driven by us. And we're just not there yet. So that's where we are. So Kevin, I would love to talk to you, and that's one of the things that I wanted to do. I just don't think this is the right place to dive down into the details of things like that. So go ahead, Kevin.
I was not really trying to talk about details. I was just trying to provide one example of a place where I just don't see what other people are telling me.
Okay.
But with all due respect, we don't actually have 2 months. We're asked to sort of sign on to this budget pretty early because there's more process here, right? It's got to go to the commission, among other things. Isn't that true?
No.
Last year we were being requested to sort of sign on to this thing by the middle of May.
No. That's not the process. The process is our budget. We review it and we pass it. Period.
Do you want me to?
Am I correct? Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, it doesn't go to the commission until it's approved in July. And so the first reading happens in May, and then the second reading and the approval reading happens in July. So we don't send it to the commission until after that.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Joe, yes, sir.
I wanted to deal a little bit with the HR area. Not only on page 16 do we have some positions, but on 17, supportive of the services for HR and policies and procedures. We talked about that at the last board meeting. I think those kinds of things are critical as part of the process, concerns that we have, and also the second part there, the additional 100,000, along with doing the professional contract services for VPs there. I think what we're trying to achieve there is appropriate. That's what we should be looking for. My concern back though on page 16 is a little bit of what we've done too often. Again, I think we've felt the need, or we do feel the need for HR services, but I guess I'd like to look around some different corners for some options here. For example, rather than hiring people full-time, what about some temporary? I mean, we're looking at some people to work with the HERA system. We're looking for some expertise there. Either we train people, we bring in some folks to provide us some contract services and training folks. I'd like to see us look at some options rather than hiring full-time people on a committed basis. I'd rather look at us take a look at temporary contractual services. to get us through, because we really don't know what we're up against here. I think we feel some challenges in this area, and I think we'd be a lot better off taking some time to look at this from a temporary contract, temporary positions, contract services from some folks, and then in a year from now, less than a year from now, we probably would have a lot better perspective as to what our needs are in HR. I think we've got some ideas what our needs are, obviously, by suggesting these, but I'd like us to take a look at a little different option there and see if that might not be a better way to approach this before we're head over heels with these folks in there.
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Mosier, I respect those comments and certainly respect the thoughts in regards to how we do that. And I'm happy to consider that and have a conversation with HR. What I can tell you is I think that as a campus and specifically as an HR department, we've been looking at all of those angles for almost 2 years now, and we have not been able to get our head above water. We know what the needs are for staffing the various human resource program areas. I've heard considerable questions and concerns about our ability to respond to the needs of our campus in and of itself, and it has to do with three main issues. One is how we take the initial leap to get from the system we have to the system we need. And that's why we're proposing the consultation services. We really need some targeted expert advice to help us with the bulk of the work that we have to do in regards to getting position control established in DataTel, to actually developing and creating the system for job descriptions and classification, just getting all those things from where we are, or maybe where we're not, to where we're going. To get that done in a year, it's going to require some consultation support with that. In regards to the personnel investments, though, the other two things that we're dealing with, though, is just the responsiveness and the bulk, and then the expertise within each of these areas, whether it's training, whether it's compliance, whether it's onboarding and the different regulations that we have to deal with. Our folks can barely keep their heads above water. So I would argue that we actually know what the needs are. The organizational assessment actually gives a pretty clear indication of both the short-term work and the long-term work that we have to do. And while I'm willing, and if the board would like me to, I'm happy to go have those conversations with Human Resources, but I'd stand here today and say that in a year I'd be back here with the same proposal. I almost guarantee that.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I appreciate that, and I think that discussion in a year would be good, and here's another reason why I'm concerned about and would be willing to wait a year. We know that, as you pointed out earlier, there are concerns about perhaps a 4% reduction coming down the road. And, you know, we know that we've got some challenges that we're going to face staff-wise. And I would hate to put people here and then turn around and have some of these things bite us. So I'd rather have the discussion a year from now as to now, you know, fill this, fill that position, and feel good about that, and know that the money's there rather than, you know, fighting that battle down the road. That's my preference.
And Mr. Chairman, Trustee Mosier, I appreciate that, and certainly I'm aware of the conversations at the state level regarding the potential for cuts in next fiscal year. Two things in regards to that, and those just because one is just to draw your attention, one of the reasons we're bolstering this contingency account almost to $500,000 is just that, provide us some of the buffer. Two, within this budget, there's a significant amount of money in consultation services for this fiscal year. Those are not ongoing base commitments in the next fiscal year. So we've actually are building some of that buffer. And three, because of the conversations and the results we hope to get to with the proposed reorganization and some of the streamlining and the shifting of different positions, that we'll actually be positioned, even with the proposed cuts, which we believe for us in the next fiscal year would be around $800,000. We believe we would be in a good position to do it. So we're taking all that into account. It's good counsel and good advice. We want to do that, but we really are looking at putting forward a budget that gives us that flexibility, as I said earlier, to respond to sort of that changing environment should those cuts actually become a reality for us in FY14.
Thank you. Kevin, go ahead.
A couple more questions here. One has to do with faculty positions. You had mentioned that you had looked at these faculty positions, at least largely from the standpoint of what sort of backlog of students do we have and so forth. I was involved in a campus that was growing very fast and was a new campus a long time ago in another place. And people made justifications, or tried to make justifications for faculty largely on that basis. They would say, for example, that we have an English program that has just beaucoup students wanting to come in and we don't have enough faculty to handle that. But the chancellor of that campus said, we're not going to allocate faculty positions strictly on that. We have needs in the future, and we have needs in the community and so forth. In some cases, they would hire positions that actually had less backlog of students, but had more promise for growth on down the road. And I'm just wondering, is the process by which we went through to hire these faculty positions, I don't know exactly what it was, but there were certainly positions that had justification in terms of number of students served and so forth that didn't end up on the list. Are we going to, I guess my biggest fear is that we're going to end up not looking at faculty positions this carefully again in the future, when I think we actually still have some more faculty catch-up to do. So I'm asking a question about some years out here. Are we going to continue to look at that pretty carefully and maybe use a broader criterion to decide that?
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Kilty, your point, and again, it pertains to process, and I agree. There are reasons we would invest in and look at investments in instructional areas. Some are to serve the immediate needs with students, which, fortunately or unfortunately, in this year, that's the data we have. I mean, those data told us, here's where we can fill sections. If we had them, here's where we're turning students away, and that really is the intent. As we work into our new processes, and really in tandem with your conversation about policies, we'll be looking at current needs as well as future needs, and really looking at ways to assess our program allocation so that we can make those investments, knowing that they may be loss leaders initially, but we'll have critical mass with students and program responsive down the road. The reality is we don't have a lot of that, at least not formally. I think we do in pockets with that. So are there positions and even proposals that are percolating right now that have potential in the future? You bet. And I've had conversations with many folks that are around those and saying, well, we'll keep that on track and look at finding a better way to analyze and do some of the scanning and this planning so that we can actually get ahead of the game instead of being in a reactive mode.
Yes, sir. Another question, and I think this will probably bring Carol into the discussion some. And by the way, I am a cantankerous person, but I wasn't trying to be cantankerous. I was trying to talk loud enough for Bill to hear.
Gotcha.
That just makes me sound like I'm really cantankerous. Don't worry about it. I like being cantankerous.
I know you do.
Anyway, you know, if you look at the new funds in here on page 14, there's a $75,000 of new money from the 1 mil source. And we had talked about this before. If we're trying to move money from 1 mil off to other uses, this looks like it's getting it wound up in sort of baseline expenditures again. And I'm just wondering, is this $75,000 part of the money that's going over here into our reserve and can come out of that reserve to do the things that the board would like to do with the 1 mil money? Is that true?
Go ahead.
Or was my question too complex there?
Well, I was going to get to that. You're stealing my thunder here for when we get going. But if you'll go over to page 24.
All right.
Page 24. What we've done this year to begin to move the expenditures from the 1 mil to the operational kinds of expenditures and salary expenditures from the 1 mil to the general fund. We did move one position over. That's why you see an increase in the academic support, kind of an artificial increase there. And we're beginning to set up that reserve. So I can't say that all of that $75,000 went into the $114,000 reserve, but in the grand scheme of things, we have moved one position over to the general fund and are beginning to set up the reserve in the 1 mil, of which the $75,000 played a part in that, yes.
You know, I don't want to get involved in her thunder right now, but the other one on this page that I find a little puzzling is this: internal funds available that have come from the operating reserve. We take $117,000 there, but then we're building operating reserve over here, $426,000. This looks like we're taking money from one pocket, putting it in the other. in fact, it looks like we're taking money out of the one pocket and putting it back in that pocket in this particular case. What's the story there?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Kelty, it's simply a way we account for what's in the budget this year, and then look at starting from at least operating expenses zero base and saying it's in there this year, but we're not automatically committing $170,000 to next year. When we went through the deliberations and into the conversations, that amount of the reserve actually included up. Sure, if you wanted to say we're continuing at least $170,000 plus the additional, you could look at it that way, but it's really a way for us to say what's in it this year that we are not automatically going to allocate and commit over. And then we talk about what do we need for different areas and budget appropriately for the coming fiscal year. And so the connection's there because of the use from one year to the other, but the reality is we say we're not guaranteeing that we're just going to carry that over. Let's talk about our needs and let's fund those appropriately. That's why there's a larger investment because of some of the uncertainties that we heard about into the coming year. So it's a way we account and we handle this process so that we don't guarantee that we're just carrying those funds available over when we know that we could reallocate those to other purposes. Is that close, Carol?
Okay, any other questions of Joe? And you'll be able to come back and ask questions of Joe. So the closet is not closed on that. What I'd like to do now, if there aren't any questions right now, I'd like to take about a 5-minute recess. Throw cups away, other types of things you may want to do, and then we'll come back and convene. I can't see that.
It's about
7:30, close 7:30 at 7:35.
But Greg, I do. If people ask me to vote on a budget, I want to be comfortable with the whole darn budget. And if I'm not, I go against it. So that's the way I am.
I'm here. I'm gonna get you. I want to. Just don't want to leave this meeting tonight.
Well, my problem is last year we never had a spot in which we could ask this sort of question. And we need that point. And then we need to get ahead of this game.
What's up?
And get in on this in about September.
I agree. We should be the first people to
Yeah.
and get the broad direction. I think that's what Joe wants to accomplish. The process is a challenge. Well, at least not doing it like used to. Have this on and go forward. That was before you were.
People have said that's basically what's still going on. That's an institution.
And I think it takes it. You know what it is?
I know it's going to be a real challenge in how.
That's because.
Think about how we'll see. And just so you? I know.
I'm not this whole area, quite frankly, I know, it's a pet peeve in this whole area is in that, and that will be probably, so my approach would be to take a look at why are they so segregated out from what happens? It's quite a process.
And then the other thing that we have to do you already
That's what he's talking
Oh, good.
Yeah.
They don't get a lot of
No, was there.
Got all these meetings. That's probably
But I will go ahead and item 14. And there are some but I want you to know that you love your job.
Well, now I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of the meeting. You figured it out. I know. I had a fat inbox for this meeting. I had like 530 something. I did inbox on my BlackBerry.
Now I only have 110.
I'm down to 38.
On my email on here, I have 300.
I had like 535 when we sat down here and started.
Maybe I want all the Okay, we are going to reconvene the meeting, so please have a seat, grab a drink, etc.
I'd love to read your stories.
Carol is going to walk us through the book, and I won't steal any of your thunder, Carol, so I'm going to give you the microphone.
Thank you much. We're not stealing my thunder. I really don't have much to say. But we're going to go ahead and start going through the funds individually. And if you'll start on page 21, much of that has already been discussed, because this is the operating fund. And one of the other graphs indicated the amounts that are differing from last year to this year's request. What I do want to point out, though, is that the numbers that you're seeing right now do not include the carryover funding. So in the end, the total revenue and the total expense, the effect on the budget will be neutral, but the numbers will actually be bigger. So just so you know that when you see this coming through on the, I think it's on the final, that the carryover numbers, and the reason for that is that we don't have the numbers right now. So the budget will grow, but the revenue will grow with it. So on the in the total, unless you have specific questions, since you've already seen a chart that indicates the increases in each of the revenue and expenditure lines, the total increase to the general fund budget from last year to this year is about 2.79%. And I think there was a question earlier about the investment in salaries and benefits, and if you look at the expenditures by series, you'll see that that's about 72% for salaries and benefits out of the whole general fund expenditure budget. So unless there's questions on that, I won't spend any more time on the general fund since we've gone through thoroughly.
Try holding it out to the side. There you go.
There you go. Okay, this is the one mill discussion, and the way we use one mill is that it does just go into the big revenue pot. We keep the revenue separated, and we do actually have expenditures that go to it, but when we're looking at it for distribution, it's looked at in the whole context of the general fund and the one mill. We currently have several positions in academic support and a lot of operating that happens in the one mill. And I think that the reason that so many of the ongoing expenses ended up in the one mill is because of the year that we actually had cuts, and we really needed to move some operating and positions there to be able to manage the cuts that were coming through. With the direction of the board, we're now going to begin to move some of those back. This year we started with a position and have moved it back, which is impacting what you see in the general fund and academic support. And we're trying to create where we develop our reserve in the one mill so that we can address, as it grows, we can address the larger kinds of one-time expenses that come forward.
Carol, the one mill increase, does that come from an increase in property value, or does it come from an additional mill levy? What's the increase?
The increase is what we are projecting to be the increase in the property assessment. Now,
Okay.
75,000
Okay.
is not very much, and we're pretty much predicting it to be almost flat. I think we predicted 1 or 2% increase, and that's just in the value of the property as it goes up.
So the one mill levy, the 82% is really not much, it's no increase really over, it's not an increase over the past.
It's not an increase in the mill over the past.
Right, but if there is an increase in property value, then
It should yield us more money.
then it yields us more money. And do you get that kind of estimate from the county assessor's office, or where do you get that estimate?
Yes, although we have a conservative assessor, and so it's a little harder to get some of that information out. So we've listened to what's happening, the economic information that comes out, and we make our own judgment pretty much. And we've been conservative, and so far that hasn't hurt us.
Have you usually been on track with your estimate of 1 mil?
Jane is a wizard.
Is she?
Being on track.
Okay. Jane the wizard.
Okay. Any other questions about the one?
On the one mill, have you noticed, and I can see this is only 75 million or 75,000, hopefully 75 million, but 75,000 this time in terms of your increase on the mill that you're projecting. Is there a perception, and Greg might have a better view of this, but because of the mineral here in the county, the exploration and possibilities going on, is there anything coming that way that would indicate that number would be higher?
I really don't. I wouldn't know that, Ed. I think that when some of those assessments come down, they're kind of based on production based, and we haven't seen any of that yet. So.
Well, the other side with the development there, it would seem like you've got a tremendous increase in valuation out there.
Trustee Thomas, I
What
believe-
development? We don't want to pay those property
Oh.
taxes yet. No. Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is, Ed. Yeah, that will come. It will come, but it just hasn't gotten going yet. So.
Trustee Thomas, Trustee Mosier, my experience with that, speculating about the oil and gas and mineral, is that it usually is the year after it's actually pulled out of the ground that we won't,
Right.
even if they start developing more oil collection in this county, we won't see that money for another year. And
Bill,
we'll
I think
become
you had a
public.
question? Whoops, I'm
No, I
sorry.
don't have a question. I was
Yeah.
going to tell Ed that most of the people that I associate with, you talk about things, their taxes have gone down, not by a lot this year,
Yeah.
but they have gone down, which would indicate that evaluations are down, Ed. And I'm talking, of course, locals. I don't know anything about the Yakima County, and I know we're a county school, but I know a lot of taxes have gone down, at least amongst friends of mine.
Right.
Correct, and that's why we're really conservative. 75,000 is not a very good number for 1 mil.
No.
Okay, any other questions about the 1 mil? Okay, we'll move on to the auxiliary fund. In the auxiliary, and that's page 21. I must have gone backwards on there. On page 29 is the graph for the auxiliary fund. In the auxiliary fund, we are projecting an increase in revenue of about 10.53%. The largest part of that increase is a carryover in the facility rental budget. We have a fund balance growing there. We want to expend some of that, and we're going to be using it for the parking lot on the west side of the residence hall, and then also the stalls that are breaking down on the east side of campus. So about a couple $100,000 of that increase is due to the carryover, and not necessarily in the change of the operations in the auxiliary fund. The residence halls are projecting no increase, or are asking for no increase, so their revenue is staying pretty flat. The increases to revenue will be from having the rooms filled at a greater percentage than the current year.
Carol, could I ask a question? On this particular graph, the salaries and benefits there, do those go to people who are involved in these various programs?
Yes.
That are generating the revenues?
Yes.
Directly?
Directly.
Okay.
In terms of facilities rentals in here, where would the rentals for, in fact, if we do rent those horse stalls, and are they incorporated in here? Do we rent those ever for shows and different things?
No, I don't think we do. I think most of that is student horses that are here. There might be some of that, but it would be very small. And if it did, it wouldn't come in here. It would probably go back to the ad program.
Okay.
This is the rental of, the outside rental of the residence hall during the summers. It's the rental of the different spaces on campus that's handled through the workforce development area. It's not a big money maker, but over the years it's started to grow. Did you have a question? Bill, did you have a question? Did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, any other questions about the auxiliary fund? Okay, the restricted fund is up about 6.21%. That's due predominantly in the increase in the Pell and the direct lending that we are now, the direct lending that we're now handling. The greatest part of the expenditures related to that are in the scholarships. So you'll see that number is up about 13% from the prior year. This is the fund that we handle all of our federal contracts, our state contracts, and contracts that have restrictions on how we can use the money ends up in this restricted fund. But for the most part, it's our scholarship federal lending programs that are in this fund. And you can see that just by the graph in the revenue, 81% of that. Any questions on the restricted fund?
Carol? Given that we now provide more of those services and getting the monies to those students, do you have any feel for this cost us an additional employee, a half-time employee? What kinds of time costs did this create?
I know that it has an impact on the operation. I do think, however, and I might defer to Grant on this, but I do believe that through the improvements and bringing the financial aid into the DataTel, bringing more of the DataTel processes into it, or the use of the software, that's helped alleviate some of that. Grant, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
It's an ongoing challenge, and we're meeting it.
Okay.
But thank you for your concern about that. That is a good point.
Okay. On to the endowment fund. This fund is strictly for us to bring in the investments and to garner from the state the challenge match funds. Almost all of that goes to the scholarships and is administered through our financial aid office. There is some operating there, but not much. And you'll notice that's about a 50% increase. We're basing that on what actually happened in the 10-11 year. We had about 1.6 million that year, and so we're anticipating with the new emphasis on giving here at the college and the fundraising that we plan on doing, that number will go up for us. So that's a pretty large increase from last year to this year. Any questions on endowment? Okay, the plant fund. This year in the plant fund, and this is where we account for our major maintenance funding and what the commission calls the contingency reserve, and that for those of you that's the coal bonus lease money as well. This year, there's a funding of about $2.2 million, and you can see the listing on page 42 and 43 of how we intend to spend that. When assessing what projects that we wanted to work on in the next year, we took into account the information that came out of the facility master plan. We looked very closely at the buildings whose facility condition index was greater than 1, and what we are calling the red buildings. So if you'll remember your facility master plan, in the back of that is a map, and they have red buildings and orange buildings. And we are looking to bring some of the orange buildings to or some of the red buildings to the orange buildings. And so you'll see some of that work in here as well. The other thing is that we're trying to address what Dr. Schaefer referred to earlier is the grounds, landscaping, lighting, things that were in the master plan as well. And if you'll recall from the last meeting, that was the 5th priority that we were trying to address. So some of that is in here as well. You can see our list is about 5.2 million, and we put more on here. So if we find that for some reason we can't do the project, or it comes in less than what we're projecting, we have projects approved that we can just keep on going, because our window to be able to do these is short. We either do them in the summer or we do them in the break, so we have to do them where it does not impact what's happening in the classroom.
Carol, I'm not understanding this. Can you tell me what the numbers that you were quoting, what page those are on? And
look at page 41. Let's start on page 41. That's the revenue picture, and what we see coming forward is the new money in the contingency reserve.
The new money being?
The contingency reserve is the new money, is new money. We have some carryover, the COLE's bonus money, and which is the same terminology as contingency reserve. We can carry over. We don't have to revert that back to the state. So we do have some carryover that we've had. Now, if you'll recall, last year we had federal money coming in, and so we kind of stopped using some of this funding so that we could get the federal funding spent in the time frame that we had to spend it. So,
I remember that.
So now this year, this money's back on the table, and we have projects that we want to address with it. So our revenue picture is up by about $512,000.
Okay, so-
all of those sources that are coming forward.
On page 41,
Uh-huh.
the top is what we have in the reserve now, is that correct? And then the second line is what we're carrying over? Because the top says contingency reserve and the second line says contingency reserve carryover. Would you
Okay.
explain that to
The
me?
contingency reserve, the top line is the co-lease bonus money that is new money to us. We'll get about a little over 600,000 for the biennium, so you only see half of it here. And so that's new money that they haven't actually approved that, but we believe that we're going to get that.
And you called that co-lease?
Co-lease bonus money, am I saying that right? Yes. The commission refers to it as contingency reserve.
Okay.
So it's they call it contingency reserve. The source of that funding is co-lease bonus money.
Oh, coal lease, C-O-A-L?
Yes.
Oh, oh.
What do you think I was saying?
Are things
Co-lease,
clear
like
now,
C-O dash lease. Like,
Oh, okay, sorry.
like cohabitation. Coal lease.
Yes.
Got it.
That's better.
Okay, so, okay, that helps me. And so we get some of that money when coal prices rise, or at least,
I think that the money that the state receives for the leases. we
for the
get a
lease,
part of.
oh, to mine coal on state land.
Yes.
I'm with ya. Okay, so now so there's an increase in that reserve, and that is held in trust, I gather, by the commission.
Correct.
And then the commission decides how to divvy it out.
Correct.
And so and they're saying, okay, LCCC, you get $20,000 more this biennium than last, or this year, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Then the carryover. So what's that 153,000, Carol?
That's the amount greater in this budget versus last budget.
Mm-hmm.
But what it represents is the money that we have collected over the years.
Yes.
That we have not expended. So.
Okay,
now-
so we get a little new and we get some that we've hung on to.
Correct.
I'm with you now. Thank you.
Okay, and then the next line is the major maintenance funding that has been approved, that will not be subject to the 4% reduction if that should happen,
And that's been approved by the commission,
by the legislature.
by the legislature. And what is that 2.2 million for? Is that what's on page 42?
Yes, all those projects.
Okay,
All of this money is going to go, all of those projects.
got
As far
it.
as it goes.
Okay, thank you.
I know you've explained this in the past because I vaguely remember something about it, but the health sciences building carryover, where did that come from? And isn't it going away soon? I mean, that isn't going to show up year after year after year.
Correct, it will not.
Yeah. And where did it come from in the first place?
It came from two different sources. It's the revenue bonds. Building revenue bonds.
It's what is left over from when we built the building itself. There was a combination of state money and the bond money.
We just simply didn't spend it at the time.
That's correct. We've been holding that because that was the purpose of those two funding sources.
Okay.
I think Ed has first.
A quick one, replace UPS and fine arts. What's UPS? We're not the UPS people. I'm just curious what that stands for.
Tim?
Uninterruptible power source, the backup for the computer server.
Thank you. And the other question has to do with replaced all building roofs, which is down there about 3/4 of the way. We had significant discussion last spring about, in fact, it was even, I believe, some visual depictions of where that the horse stalls might be relocated. And is this the same horse stalls or the ones connected to the arena, and what happened to the horse stalls?
Okay, there are two different projects. The one that you see here is the one that's connected to the arena, and it's replacing the roof on that stall. So that's a different project than replacing the stalls that are outside.
And
Replacing the stalls outside is coming out of the facility rental money.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the plant fund? Okay, the end.
Wow. Okay.
Contraire.
Okay, let's open it up for questions of Carol, and if you do have some follow-up questions of Dr. Schaefer, let's do that. So if there's additional questions.
Can I just say one thing about
Sure.
this slide? The budget increase from last year to this year is up about 5.21%. So our total budget now is about $67 million.
Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? Let me remind you, and I'll talk with Kevin, if there are some specific things, you can spend some time with the book and so on. If there are specific questions you'd like to get answered, please email them to me. And if you don't have my email address that you may have, because you get email to all of us, and I will get you my email address. I will try to accumulate those, and the reason I'm the clearinghouse is to make sure that we get them all addressed. And then I will forward those on to Carol and to Dr. Schaefer, and we will try to get answers, explanations, etc. Put together on those as quickly as we can. And I do think over the next, what are we in April, May, probably ought to, Vicki, put a agenda item on all of those, on all of our meetings, be it a study session or a regular meeting, to at least address any items people would like to speak to on the budget. And I think, Carol, again, when do we formally get something more on the budget? In May?
Correct. You'll see a little different book.
Okay, we'll get another book. Okay. I just want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable that they can have some input, and if they have questions, and that we will address those when needed. So, yes, Doctor.
Mr. Chairman, were you going to entertain public comment, or see if there's? I'm sure there's some other folks here that might have some.
I can entertain public comment.
Some
Thank you
thoughts.
for reminding me, I'm not looking. Yeah, I'd like to hear any type of public comment if there is any. Anybody behind me?
No, maybe not.
Not even Archie? Not even Jerry?
You guys got anything today?
Mr. Chairman, trustees, I do have.
You know what? I'm going to give you the podium so we can hear you, Archie.
I could use my teacher voice.
Oh, there we go.
I would need the podium. Thank you, Mr. Chair, trustees. My name is Archie Nisley, and I'm not here for Phi Theta Kappa or as Faculty Senate. I'm going to speak for myself. My biggest concern that I hope that you will take under advisement is regarding the athletic director position. So I've jotted a few notes. I want to thank President Schaefer for giving some explanation for the need for that position. But I think even after listening to those comments, I'd like to say a few things. First of all, one of the things I heard was that there are some scheduling issues with the facility. We want to offer more options for the students to have activities in that building. But I think those scheduling issues can be taken care of with staff that we already have. Just yesterday in the President's Cabinet meeting, the building was approved for 20 additional hours of activities, and I think we can make those kinds of things happen without hiring an athletic director. The other thing is that I've also heard that we'll increase some programming in intramurals, maybe even women's basketball. And although I applaud that, I can see the athletic director coming before you next year saying that with these increased programs, I need a new building because the facilities are overtaxed. There's scheduling problems already, and they're going to be scheduling problems. And I can see the fine and performing arts building being pushed further down the list because we will be creating a need that we don't have right now. And the other thing that came to mind when I saw one of the slides was that LCCC charges the most in tuition and fees compared to the other community colleges because we are collecting an intramural fee and we are not offering intramurals. I see a solution there. Let's stop charging the students the intramural fees and come in line with our fees that we are charging our students. If students can have more access to the building and they still want intramurals, I think that's something we can look further down the road. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Archie.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, just a clarification, and I appreciate Archie's comments. That slide actually illustrates the revenue distribution per student FTE. It's not actually a reflection of where we rank in terms of charging tuition and fees with the other community college. It's just simply that of all of our revenue distributed per student FTE, a larger portion of our revenue comes from tuition and fees. In part, that may just be a function of the fact that we're the biggest community college in the state of Wyoming as well. So just a clarification, we should look at our fees, and I don't disagree at all with those comments at all.
Okay. Okay, last call. Any other public comment?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead, Ed.
Just to tag along with the fees issues, you know, everything you see and read talks about accessibility and affordability of education for students, and we know what kind of debt that they seem to find out there. When we look at the fees, we've heard before, and I think I'm correct in this, and Grant may want to speak to it, but that the students have assessed those themselves. The students chose to assess those themselves. And on one hand, I'm here concerned that, wait a minute, those fees are pretty high. I mean, they're expensive. But I'd like to hear from, you know, maybe ASG, the students taking a look at that, knowing that we, or some of us as board members, I think, maybe all, are concerned about those, but I think we'd like to hear from ASG whether they're concerned or not.
Do you want to answer those questions, Misty?
Okay.
Misty serves
Sure,
on
go on up, Misty.
Hi, Misty.
Hello. Mr. Chairman, Board, I'm Misty. I'm the treasurer for our Associated Student Government here on campus, I guess formerly now SGA. So student fees, I think, are a major concern to students here. And I don't think it's necessarily, well, I can't say it's not necessarily the price, because it is the price. It does cost a lot. But I think the real concern is that we want to know where our money is going. We want to know that the fees that we're paying into are being given back to us, that if we're being charged for this particular program, that this program is actually available to us, such as the intramurals program, which has pretty much been the talk of the students for the last 6 months. They want intramurals. They want to be active. They want to have opportunity. They don't want to have to be on the basketball team to be able to play in basketball tournaments. So I think that students are really willing to look over the allocation of fees and where that money is going, and really to identify some priorities, you know, as far as, okay, here is what we're willing to pay for, and this is how much we're willing to pay for. And I think that's the primary issue. It's just that there are these fees, but we don't specifically or necessarily know exactly where they're going. So, and I think that student government, that's definitely been a hot topic for us, and it's something that we definitely are willing to look more into and work with whoever we need to work with to sort of remedy that issue and really provide some clarification and some transparency to where that money goes. So.
I have a question. How do we account for that, Carol? Go ahead.
Trustee Thomas, we have, right now, our fee is $35 per credit hour, up to 12 hours, and a couple of the fees actually are on every credit hour, but most of them are only up to 12 hours. The largest portion, about an equal portion of the fees are accounted for in the agency fund, and it's at the discretion of the students to distribute as they choose. A portion of the fees goes to athletics, a portion goes to the high-tech fee, and the other portion goes to the facilities fee. It's a facility fee that's using to pay the bond indebtedness on the residence hall. So the students control the greatest part of this. The students have also voted, as Trustee Mosier had indicated, had voted these fees themselves. So in order for those fees to be changed, the students would have to actually do that themselves, outside of the facility fee.
Okay. And so the agency fund is this, tell me what the agency fund is.
The agency
It's
fund
not in
is
the book.
a fund that represents things that we only act as an agent for,
Okay.
that we really don't have control over that.
Okay.
At the board. does
And
not
then
have control
I
over
guess
that.
I'm going to ask Misty, it would seem to me that part of what you may want is some type of reporting. Am I correct with that? Here's what was collected, here's what was spent.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. I
Okay.
think that,
Okay?
yeah.
Is that a possible thing to do?
Yes, and I do believe that there is some reporting back to the students. On the high-tech fee, I know that Mr. Marley goes and tells them what they've spent the money on. I think probably I think athletics also makes a report to the students. Now, whether they want those different than what they're getting now, I can't answer that.
Well, I guess I would propose, just out of information, that you take a look and that, I mean, what I would like to see is just show me the whole thing on one piece of paper, not bust it up, and here's the money coming in and here's where the money goes out, and give somebody an opportunity to ask questions. I think that would at least solve part of the problem if we could do that.
I'd have to say for the last 2 years of my experience that those have not occurred.
Okay.
I'm the current treasurer for the student
Okay.
government this year, and so, I mean, I think that's where sort of
Okay.
the idea is there, and maybe it's well intentioned, but it just hasn't occurred.
Okay.
So I think that's the issue.
Okay. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I guess the question I'd like to ask is, do the students vote on these fees each year? Because you say the students vote on them. Is it a historical vote, or is it a year-by-year vote?
No, it's not a year-by-year vote.
So it's
They have,
historical.
at some point in time, they have voted to tax themselves.
Okay, so it could have been 10 years ago that
Yes.
they decided to put this, so this student group maybe didn't have anything to do with the fees that are charged to them.
That is correct.
Okay.
But to undo it, they would have to have a vote.
Okay, and that, to me, that's a good thing to know, because they need to know that to undo it, they do have that capability. And so that's good knowledge for you as students. Thank you.
Okay. So Carol, I guess I would just like to offer up, if it isn't too difficult to do, if somehow, some way we can pull together an agent's, whatever you want to call the report, but a revenue and expenses report, and be able to, I think probably the most effective way is to deliver it to the student government, then you guys can dole it out any way that you want.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a reasonable thing to do?
That would be terrific.
So I would, ask Carol or Dr. Schaefer that if we can get that done and make sure that it's not an onerous thing, but I think that would be helpful, so. Okay.
Sure.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, since there seem to be no more comments, I would move that we conclude this study session, take a short break, and reconvene an executive session to talk about a personnel matter.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, got a second? Okay, any discussion? None, let's take a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we will reconvene. It is, I again can't see that far, in 10 minutes, because I know I promised somebody I would chat with them.